My name is Nora Hayashi. As you might be able to tell from my name, I am the product of two cultures. My parents are from Japan, but I grew up in the United States. Years ago, when I was a rebellious teenager, I thought that all of the problems between me and my parents were cultural. I was American, and they were Japanese. But eventually I realized that a lot of our difficulties were due to a generation gap. One of the main differences between my generation and the ones that came before is that people my age are more open to new ideas. Take food, for example. My grandmother only ate Japanese food, never anything else. My parents will occasionally eat Chinese food, but they really don't like to experiment. I, however, eat all different kinds of food. Thai food, Korean food, pizza, burgers, I love it all. It's true that I eat Japanese food the most. It has always meant home to me, and it's still my favorite. But the point is that I am open to things my parents and grandparents weren't. Food might not seem like a very important example, but it represents a whole attitude towards new and different experiences. My parents' resistance to change was the source of a lot of frustration for me when I was young. Besides attitudes toward new experiences, I guess the biggest difference between my generation and my parents is the role of women. My mom didn't have a job. She took care of the house and cooked for us. She was an amazing cook, and she used to have dinner ready for us every evening. Sometimes she wouldn't even eat with the family because she was too busy bringing fresh, hot dishes to the table. We would be almost finished with dinner by the time she sat down to eat. Her complete dependence on my father really bothered me when I was young. Girls in my generation went to college and pursued careers. But, in all fairness, my mom didn't mind her role. She took pride in creating a perfect dinner for us. It was her art. And I think it gave her as much pleasure as the food gave us. I'm completely different, though. I'm a doctor. I don't have time to cook very often, and my husband doesn't expect me to. Actually, he's a better cook than I am, although he doesn't have time to do it very often either. We're just both really busy. When my daughter was growing up, I'm afraid she ate a lot of takeout food. My mother thought this was selfishness, but I think it's just the way things are now. Now that I have a teenage daughter of my own, I think the generation gap between us is narrower than it was between me and my parents. In some ways, I'm not as strict as my parents were. I allow my daughter more independence, and she can handle it just fine. On the other hand, I have very high expectations when it comes to her schoolwork, so I do have that in common with my parents. I think the biggest difference between my generation and my daughter's is technology. Hers is the first generation to grow up with a cell phone in its hand. I haven't figured out the significance of that yet, but it's definitely a change. I hear a lot of people my age complaining about kids these days, but I think we should let them grow up before we make judgments.